Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order the Pierce County Council in a committee of the whole meeting for June 30th, 2025. The time is 1:31. If the clerk could please call the roll.
Councilmember Yambe.
Here.
Councilmember Morel.
Here.
Councilmember Kruver.
Here.
Councilmember Ayala.
Here.
Councilmember Denson.
Here.
Councilmember Herrera.
Here.
Councilmember Hitchin.
Here.
You have 7 members present.
With 7 members present, we do have a quorum. Thank you all for taking some time this afternoon to continue diving into our agenda. We have 2 items on the agenda. Any changes or corrections? Okay, we will move forward to item number 4, which is review and council discussion on the 26-27 budget. We're going to turn this over to Mr. Boki.
Thank you, Chair Hitchin, Paul Boki, council staff. So today is a day for continued discussion of the council budget priorities for the 26-27 biennium. I'll call your attention to there were some requests last time from the council, and in your packet, beginning I believe on page 4 and going on to page 5, is information as to the functions of county government in Washington State, and there's RCW sites to this, and that's one of the things that the council requested on the what government had to do and functions of county government in Washington State. So that is for your information. Beginning on page 1 of the packet is the budget priorities, and then on page 2 and 3 are what we call investments. So we've broken those out. I would also mention that the priorities page and the investment page have changed a little bit. For this packet, I moved some things around just for, in my mind, what I thought was a little bit help with the priorities and whatnot. So it is a little bit different than what you saw probably a week or so ago, but it basically remains intact. The subject matter remains intact. I just moved some items around for ease of reading. And some items have been added because there were other council members, there were suggestions from council members. So the purpose of today really is to go through those priorities and also the investments and decide which ones should move forward into a resolution, because the ultimate goal here is for the council to put forward a resolution that you will send to the executive with your priorities, your budget priorities, and try to do that in the next month or so. So as the budget is being formulated for the next biennium. So I would also say, and just to reiterate, we did not put the council priorities page in there, but the priorities listed are housing and homelessness, public safety, physical and behavioral health, education and workforce, economic growth and infrastructure, environment and climate, and community building. And I think going forward, I'll probably use those titles more than has been used so far in the priorities and in the investment page. But with that, Chair, I will send it back to you to begin the council discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Boki, and thanks for the work, and thank you for numbering. I think if nothing else, I was very pleased to see numbers so we could refer back and forth to each other by number instead of the 4th one down from the bottom type thing or something. So, so I think one of the things I would like to do is almost kind of go through each of the listed, the first page, to see if there's anything specific that you are concerned about as a potential priority, or if you have additions on this first page, then dive into, with whatever time left, to the investments, because I feel like the priorities is kind of that first big item and will help our staff who are going to be trying to put this into a resolution. So looking at item number 1, which talks about maintaining the core functions, I'm not going to read it to you. You have it in front of you. But is there are there concerns about making this kind of one of the top things in this resolution as we move forward as a council? I'm not going to make you vote or anything. I'm just kind of looking for, okay. The second one, which is talking about the new indigent offense caseload standards. We'll go to Councilmember Denson.
Thank you, Chair. My thought on this one is it's fine to leave it. I mean, I don't have a problem with leaving it, but it is a core function as defined by number 1, because core functions are defined as those required by state law. And now this is a requirement of state law. So if we wanted to simplify, we could, because this is one of those required things that now we're calling out separately. So it's just, I mean, it's fine either way. But that just struck me right away.
Okay. And I would add it's a new core function. Well, it's not a new core function. It's a new way of thinking about how we provide this core function, and we're still trying to unpack the costs associated with this new mandate. We are much further along than some of our colleagues in other counties as far as how we've invested in this, but it still is, we're still trying to figure out exactly what the rules will do as far as the cost to us as a county. Councilmember Krueger?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm inclined to agree with Councilmember Denson. It absolutely, I believe, goes in number 1, but to point it out because it is kind of a new type of mandate, you could use it as required by state law, such as indigent defense, and then go on. That way it does eliminate and kind of clean up the list.
Okay.
That's a good suggestion.
Wordsmithing together. I like it. Okay. Any other thoughts on item number 2? Okay. Item number 3, in regards to federal funding loss, we know of some that we are aware of as far as continuum of care and some of the other organizations we're continuing to track to see what the impacts are there. This one, looking for thoughts on if there's specific words, programs that you think we want to call out. Again, it's a moving target, so it's a little challenging, but the intent here is to say that while we're not going to promise that we're going to fill these gaps, because we actually can't fill some of these federal government gaps, that we want to work really hard, and we hope that the county will work hard to make sure that we are reducing harm if it's possible, is how I read this. Councilmember Morrell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would also like to know if Mr. Boakey could get us what percentage of these programs are run by federal funding grants versus what the county spends on current budget, how much we spend on that.
Yeah, we have that available. I think that's.
Is it 80-20 or whatever? Because, we're obviously going to be limited, and I just want to know how much if we can't accept the terms and conditions. So, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Krueger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I asked for it, but I'm looking for a list of the specific programs that are causing us to lose the federal funding. So if I have constituents asking me, well, what's with the loss of the federal funding, I can be specific with them truthfully. And so I try to make a request for that.
Are you talking about the language in the contract that we...
What are the programs that Pierce County has that makes the federal government say you don't get your money, if I may be blunt?
Okay. Staff are kind of signaling that they have that information and can get that to you.
Okay.
Or do we, Mr. Taylor?
Hugh Taylor, council staff. To your point earlier, Chair, I think Councilmember Krueger is referring to the conditions associated with the grants that are speak to certain types of programs. We can compile that information, but as far as having a specific list of all county programs that might be of concern to the federal government. We can't produce that. We can produce the categories of concern.
Okay. Councilmember Krueger, is that what you are trying to get at?
I think so, but I think the answer would be more clear when I can go over what I get and see if I still have more questions.
Okay.
So I'll work with that. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Does that change your belief in having this item in our list of priorities?
No, not
Okay.
necessarily.
Okay. So appreciate the questions. Thank you, and we'll follow up. Thank you. We're going to go to Councilmember Denson.
Yes, I just had a thought, and now I can't find it in my email, but Executive Mello put out an alert or an e-newsletter or something just last week that went over some of the reasons why we might be losing federal funding. That kind of hits the high points. I don't know if anybody can find that. And Councilmember Krueger, do you know what I'm talking about? I just read it.
It was that email that caused me to ask specifically what programs were referred to in that email.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you for reminding me of how I got the idea to ask. So there you go.
Okay.
Takes a village, everybody. Okay. Councilmember Ayala.
Thank you, Chair. I also wanted to add, we received a presentation from Julie DeMuth not too long ago where they did have a one-pager in our packet that outlines some of that. I don't know if that's to the level of detail that Councilmember Krueger may want, but it did give us some sense of those numbers.
Okay, so we'll follow up. We'll do some phone a friends and figure out what we're looking for. Any other comments on this one? Okay, item number 4 comes from thinking about many of us appreciating the idea of having community needs fund, something that's got a program behind it. The wordage here is just to fund it. It doesn't give a specific number. It just says fund it. I didn't know if people wanted a specific number, but this was kind of a blanket statement of please put money in this pot of money so that we have things we can do for our districts. We could be more specific. We can leave it vague. Thank you. Councilmember Krueger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to be a little more specific in that in districts that I would say are more marginalized and don't qualify for a lot of the programs in the city, that their accounts get a little extra. So, be more fair.
I actually think with the legislation, the way we passed it, we can't do that because we said it would be split evenly between, whatever the pot of money was, would be split evenly but amongst the 7 districts, and I'm getting a lot of head nods, so.
It was, but maybe we could amend that. Just wishful thinking. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Ayala, did you change your mind?
Not for the moment.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that? Should we do these as a round table without microphones so y'all will talk more? Is that what I need to do? Okay, we're good, okay. Combating food insecurity, continuing with food purchases. I believe that this actually started, Councilmember Burrell, in 2020 was the first time the county invested in food formally. Does that sound right? Okay. And before that had been maybe other allocations to food pantries or organizations in individual districts.
Yeah.
You sound so excited. It is what happened though?
Yeah, I mean, it was the first time we started putting together large disbursements
Okay.
to mainly EFN and some of the other community food banks where we allocated dollars for capital and other things. So it was basically the first time we had a lot of money.
Yeah.
So we were able to do that.
Okay. So are there issues? Again, we don't know where the money's coming from, but as a priority, the idea of saying food is a priority when we think about our seniors and children and families that are trying to make things happen, and we have increased our infrastructure for getting food to people. The demand is high. So looking at some way to try and call out using, if there's tools for food insecurity. Councilmember Krueger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Because I don't disagree with having the safety net with the food going out. I just didn't know, I'm assuming now there's no number tied to it, so we're not committed to the numbers that we had when we had the ARPA dollars. So is this just making sure it has a place at the table, that it's considered, and we're looking to make that a priority to fund, but within reason?
My intent with this is to signal that we would like the executive and his team to find a funding source to invest. Because right now, other than general fund, I don't know what other funding sources there are. And we may have, again, going back to item number 1, we are saying core county responsibilities is our top priority. At least that's how I read this document. But I really hope we can find a way to do this. So we don't have CARES, we don't have ARPA. So what are the other pots of money? But I think being creative to think about it is a good idea. So short answer, yes.
Have we had like a roundtable of the different providers and getting feedback on what works, what doesn't work, and how they've been successful with getting dollars and without getting dollars? Is that something we've really done in the past, or just kind of an informal roundtable?
I remember if in HHS we did kind of a panel or talk to. We've had a couple presentations. We've heard from Good Roots Northwest. We've heard from EFN, and one of the things that we'd heard was just buying food is one of the things they are always looking for, because they can buy in bulk and get to all of our smaller organizations. But I know they really appreciated when we provided grants to like buy refrigerators and freezers and some of those other things and food lockers, but I don't think we're going to be in a place to do that. And for me, it's about having food to distribute.
I just, when you hear pros and cons and from different providers, and it might be worthy of finding all the good things, and maybe those can be spread to the other parts of the district or of the county as well. So it's a work in progress, I understand, and appreciate having it on the list.
Councilmember Yambe, in your meeting tonight, do you have any, I know you have Eloise's cooking pot there. Maybe it's a question Councilmember Krueger could ask during the meeting on what would be helpful for, at least for one entity's example.
Yeah, I think that is a reasonable question, and so, you know.
If we think of it.
Yeah, because Eloise's does utilize EFN, one of their top users, and so I think it would be a good occasion to ask those questions that you have, Councilmember Krueger. Just anecdotally, but it's a pretty big organization that they do a lot of that outreach. So.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
And I'll check our HHS agenda or work plan and see if we've got anything on food insecurity. I'm not remembering it because we shifted to housing and homelessness, but we could always see. Any other questions on this one? Again, not an item number. Okay. Y'all are so quiet. Okay. Council's committed to maintaining work for Crystal Judson, so domestic violence, we've continued to look at that as an area. Pierce County has some of the highest rates per population in the state of Washington, and this is another area where we are potentially losing or have lost federal funding, so it's one of the things. So. And I'm not sure that we call out Crystal Judson if it's just domestic violence. That's a question I have. I know they're the organization that we fund, but we also have other providers. I don't know if anybody has thoughts on that. Does it make sense to call out a specific organization? Councilmember Denson?
Well, yes, when I first read this, that struck me too. I was like, we don't call out really any other organizations that are not Pierce County, but I know Crystal Judson is very connected
Well,
with
they're
Pierce County.
County employees.
Right. So that's where I got to, okay. And I did in my notes suggest maybe we should call it the Pierce County Crystal Judson, just to make sure people knew this was, a Pierce County entity. But to your point, maybe we should broaden it a little bit. We could still mention them, but say committed to maintaining funding to address domestic violence in Pierce County, such as
Including Crystal.
including something like that.
Okay.
Because then it broadens it a little bit because, like you said, it's a major issue in our county.
Thank you. Councilmember Morrell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The question that I have with the Crystal Judson Family Justice Center, are we the sole supporter
No.
of that? Is so Tacoma and we haven't heard of any reduction. Obviously, Tacoma's got its challenges,
So Crystal Judson has they do a lot of subcontracts where they work with providers with direct federal funding, one of them being Our Sister's House, and had to let 2 of their advocates go because the contract was not renewed, even though the intent was. So we've lost one of our main providers, one of our main advocates. We're working on trying to write that, but we don't have an answer right now. And so that's one of those types of programs that are being harmed while all of this is going on, because they started the work for us, assuming, like everyone else, that federal dollars would just continue to flow, and then they did not.
okay.
So, but I do like the idea of making it more about domestic violence and then the example of Crystal Judson. And I think we should probably follow up and find out if there were any impacts to Tacoma's funding source as well, because I think we're making an assumption that Tacoma's going to fund at the level they have in the past. And per the ILA, I think kind of like the health department, there's a requirement, but they're facing some similar challenges as we are. So. Mr. Boki, did you have something to add?
No, well, you took the words right out of my mouth. We'll wordsmith that to broaden to domestic violence services, including the Crystal Judson Family Justice Center.
And I think we made this in our council priorities. We had a term that we used to kind of, and maybe to align documents so that the words we're using over here are the same that are over here. I think we said domestic violence and intimate partner, or domestic and intimate partner violence, or something like that.
You're exactly correct. Prevent intimate partner violence and family violence.
Okay, so that way we're using our own words. Anything else, Councilmember Morrell?
No, thank you.
Okay. 7, high inflation has led to higher operating costs through cover government. We're all feeling this whenever we're paying any of our bills right now. Thoughts on this one? I know I'd heard from several of you about this in relation to items. Vice Chair Herrera?
I definitely understand that we probably have to take a look at our fees, but I just think that we need to be very careful with this, because I think compounded with fees, you have like late fees. People who can't pay their bills have a late fee, and if we're increasing that, that's affecting our most vulnerable folks. Get back to the ARPA funds and some of the programs that helped vulnerable folks pay their bills. Those are going away, and then at the same time, we're going to start increasing fees and things like that. I think that we just need to be very careful as we do this. And if we're doing it if the goal is to achieve the full cost recovery, I don't know if we're going to do it with everything, or is it just core government services, or are we going to do it with transit? I don't know. So just a thought.
Thank you for the thought. We'll go to Councilmember Denson.
Yes, thank you. Those are really good things to consider. When I looked at this, I was thinking of permit fees, development costs, things like that. We know that we're not capturing the full cost of doing business. We've had presenters up here from Planning and Public Works explain that to us. So that's what I envisioned. You know, I think transit, that would be Pierce Transit. That's completely separate. Health Department's separate. Libraries separate. They set their own fees. I'm thinking about kind of the county business, and it's costing us money to do something that we're not trying to make money off of people, but we need to cover our costs in this environment. Those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you. That's how I interpret this too. And I don't know, like late fees and things like that. I don't know what we charge except for like sewer, maybe. If there's any other late fees on things. I don't remember adopting late fees for any of our ordinances, but to your point, I think we don't want to make it, you know, if people are late paying a fee, being double, triple, and quadruply assessed is not our goal. Again, I think getting what it costs us as the government to do the work to the best of our ability. We've had this conversation with the ferry about what it actually costs to run the ferry, and versus what people are paying, and they know their ferry rates are going to go up consistently. But if we actually tried to do the true cost of the entire ferry per passenger, no one could take the ferry. So it's a problem. I'm going to go to Councilmember Krueger and then Councilmember Ayala.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Hitchin. This is a real difficult kind of a catch-22 because inflation, I understand with the permit fees because I too looked at that, but yet we keep adding to the shopping cart of mandates for people to pay for. And we're pricing people out because, you know, with this kind of inflation. So I think we need to be better at discerning what they have to pay for and what not. Things that we didn't have to permit before, but all of a sudden here comes this, we have this situation and we need to now permit everybody because if we don't, things will get out of hand. I guess I want to trust the constituent more than what we give them credit for. And I don't think we're considering the financial ability of our constituents when we keep increasing prices and putting cost of living with it, because their wages aren't necessarily going to the cost of living. And if we look 50 years down the road at all of this built in, we're going to get into where the price of a loaf of bread is going to be $100. And I know we can't maintain that. And I don't know what the perfect answer is, but when I look at what it's costing, builders to do like the cultural study, adding that on to the cost of doing business, that just makes it all the more difficult for our constituents to stay afloat. So we should, I think, take a deep dive on what we have to do and to what extent to do it. And, on a scale of 1 to 10, I say a lot, do I roof my house or buy a plant for the garden? Or for the flower bed. So we need to fix the roof before we plant the flower bed. So that's where I think inflation needs to be looked at very closely. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for the comments. Just to kind of capture the, I'm going to call it curiosity you have, is there, like, if we added something in here around really investigating the cost of the service or something like that so that we truly understand what it is, and are there any ways to reduce costs by, I don't know, things happening simultaneously or more efficient ways of doing them so that the costs can remain the same? So that could be part of it as they're looking at this. Do you want that captured in here?
Lowering the cost and the value of the service.
Well, I don't want lower value service. I want them to.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the thing is, it's always, like quality daycare. Well, who wants unquality or bad quality? It's, I guess, what is the end result? Is it going, how important is it? Yeah, if we do it now or do it later, when when you don't have the dollars to do things, like I don't plan vacations, when there's a disaster happening, kind of a thing. And I think we need to get off vacation mode from all of the ARPA dollars to where now we're down to the nuts and bolts. And if I don't do this study or have that, having to hire more people to look at plans because more things have been added to them, it creates a vicious cycle. And did that make sense on what I just said? Because when you keep having more requirements on the plans for your house or your development, then you need more people to review those plans. So giving them less to do would be helpful.
Okay. Mr. Boki, I saw your light come up. I'm going to go to you before I go to Councilmember Ayala.
Thank you. So the fee section here is broad in general because the fees are very broad and different in all their respects. So things like most park fees are in the general fund. A lot of them, not all of them. Golf course fees, for instance, are in their own actually enterprise funds. So in the general fund, the council can determine the level of subsidy they would like the general fund to make, and you can work that through the normal process. You receive a separate ordinance for each item. And so for, let's say, parks fees that are in the general fund, those are decisions that the council can make. The enterprise funds, the ferry, the golf courses are much trickier because you haven't made decisions or policy decisions to make subsidies from the general fund into those funds. They are supposed to run as close as you possibly can to business. There are other sources of revenue, especially for like ferries, as you know. Some of the special revenue funds, specifically the planning one in the Biennial Development Fund, the Biennial Development Fund was started under an agreement between the county and the building community as to the capture of funds and payment for services rendered. And so the special revenue funds are a whole new thing. So to make a decision about that would be to change that agreement that was made between the building community and the county a number of years ago. I think I saw something today. It was as early as 2011. Mr. Taylor was in on almost all those meetings, had the pleasure of being in almost all those meetings and could speak more to that. So each fee is different and because each fund is different. And so there's things like, one of the things I imagine you'll get is jail fees. So I don't know that there's a policy that the council has ever put together that said, hey, when we charge entities, mostly cities, for paying for misdemeanors in our jail, we want 100% cost recovery, we want 75% cost recovery, those kind of things. And so it's broad. This line has to be broad because the fees are so broad in nature and for different purposes and in different funds and are under different rules under those funds.
Thank you. That helps. I think one of the things that I don't think I've really ever seen in my role on this council is how much it costs to do the work. So the example of, I'm doing a site plan overview. I'm making this up. I don't know if it's a thing, but I'm doing a site plan overview and it takes 4 hours of staff time and 1 additional hour for some other staff that has to look at it. So it's 5 hours of time. So then the fee is determined this way. And this is how they do the fees at the health department. They basically say, this is the standard for this type of operation. It takes this many of hours. And I don't know I truly don't know how these fees are set, especially within building, fire, all of these different things, even our jail. I truly don't know. So maybe that's the ask in this, is like, we want to know when we get these fee ordinances, we want to see the justification, as opposed to That way it's public. I'm not sure, but we will go to Councilmember Ayala. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Boki, I feel like you added some wrenches there to what I was going to say. I'm hoping that maybe in this priority number 7, to the degree applicable, in the review of service fees, to include a financial hardship plan, just to address some of the points that have been said before. And then I also wanted to advocate, and again, the fee structure is quite nuanced, but in terms of, there's a line in here that says changes included within the biennial budget in terms of those fees. I know that sometimes if those fees have not been updated in a long time, that increase could be quite high. And so having those changes in a biennial budget could harm a few relationships or whatnot. So if it's possible to extend that timeline to get us to a good rhythm of updating our fee structure, in which we can reduce some harm to those relationships that continue to invest in Pierce County, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Mr. Boki, did you capture that?
I did with the financial hardship plan, and we can easily add provide justification of the request. Those should be standard with any fee increase. The last point, typically we have always asked when a fee increase comes up with the budget, have you assumed the fee increase in the budget? That's a standard question the council will ask of anybody, and almost every time in my memory the answer is yes. So usually by the time you see the fee increase, it's already been figured into next year's or the next biennium now's increase. Now, that doesn't prevent the executive from doing increases over 2 years, because you can just spell those out. These are they're almost all in code. So you can set dates in there if you'd like, if that's something, because if you do run into some pretty steep increases, and it's possible you may have some, and I would consider double digits. I mean, that's in my mind. I would consider that a large increase. And that's certainly, I can put some language in there about, I'll figure out a way on that.
Okay. Thank you. We're going to go to Councilman Morale in the room.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think this is more of a philosophical question than anything. You know, I always get asked the question, what does my property taxes pay for? And why do I got to pay all these additional fees? I thought that's what I pay taxes for. So, how do we answer that in a legitimate way that says fees are for what? Special benefit? What are, and I'm not talking about building fees or anything like that. I mean, the special service fees, whether it be dock fees or whatever. I mean, that is kind of the question that I've been asked multiple times is, here's the core function. Property taxes should support core functions. Why do we got to continue to pay fees on top of that core function cost? So is it because the departments have grown to the point where we have to now balance it on special fees? Or can we contract the departments down? And what impact would that be if we just eliminated fees? How do we balance that out? Because I see these fees just continuing to expand, continuing to increase, and at one point, just because you're a user, you live in the county, why can't I use my park or use whatever? So anyway, I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole, but, that's one of the questions I always ask when the fee schedules come up. What are we doing? Why are we doing this? So anyway, there again, I'll get off my soapbox.
Sometimes it's fun to stand on a soapbox. Councilmember Krueger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm on that soapbox too, and thank you, Councilmember Morrell, for that. I think we want to call that fee fatigue is where everybody is on this. And what I was gleaning from what he was saying is that what we need is to be able to validate all the fees we already have and to be able to justify. And if we can't, then maybe there needs to be a rethink on that. But something that had come to my attention by a constituent is that when they're getting an inspection from one of the agencies, they're sending out maybe the trainee, but charging the price of the credentialed person. And I don't know that that's really fair to the constituent. And something else that, I have to look at, just doing a lot line division is thousands of dollars. And I sit back and I go, how can that be? It's just you get a survey, you have 2 points and you record it. But yet somehow there's all of these other things that get involved that are thousands and thousands of dollars. And I think that is something that should be looked at in order, again, to validate the fees that are charged. So, and I've had my other note, but anyway, that's my last 2 points, or 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. I think one of the things that's kind of resonating with the conversation is really allowing us to understand why this fee was set. So understanding the methodology. Like I said, I've never seen it for the health department. So why is it several $1,000s to do a lot line something or rather, and a sprinkler system inspection is whatever it is?
Hugh Taylor, council staff, I just want to make one note just for any members of the public that might be watching. The Department, Planning and Public Works, does do a calculation to determine their cost of providing services when they determine fee increases. The council has in the past received that information in any given year. What I'm hearing is that this council would like to get grounded on the universe of fees and the methodologies for calculating those fees and fee increases. Staff can certainly facilitate that. But for the public watching, I just want to communicate that the departments do in fact do a cost of service analysis when fees are set. And fees generally aren't set to generate a profit, right? If they recover the full cost of service, then they're hitting that benchmark. Oftentimes they're not recovering the full cost of service. So, but we'll work to get that information for council.
Okay, I think that would be helpful to understand. Councilmember Krueger, did you have something else?
Thank you. Just one more cent is that ways to job things out. Maybe if some of the services where it would be more beneficial that someone else in the county or wherever has the ability to do things, and that might be less expensive than for the government to do it. So I don't know if that could be part of what we look at. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. We're going to go to Councilmember Ayala.
Thank you, Chair. I also wanted to add, in addition to the full cost of service from PPW, if we could get a cost of service from our enterprises as well. Thank you.
Okay. So we have some wordsmithing to do on this one. Are there any other comments on number 7? Okay. Let's see if your energy stays the same as we move on to number 8. So protect long-term health of the general fund. We have established I want to say 15%, what's the term? Fund balance that we've maintained. We are required at 10, but 15 is where we've stayed as here's the line, and we think this is a much healthier. Was it ever actually established by code that we stay at 15?
We did it by resolution.
Okay.
Council did it by resolution.
Okay.
Years ago.
So we have a resolution that says we have to stay at 15% to be able to keep ourselves in between property tax seasons whole. But is this still continuing to be a priority, an area that we want to continue to work on, making sure that we're figuring out how to pay things, but potentially there's some items in here like the Puget Sound taxpayer account, the behavioral health, PASTA dollars, I already said that one, just some of our other dollars that we have access to, some of them long-term, some of them short-term, but figuring out how we can use some of those funds if we end up in a pinch. We'll go to Councilmember Denson.
Thank you, Chair. In answer to your question, I guess, I think it is important to retain a healthy fund balance. 15%, I think, is at a minimum is great. So I think that we need to look at our local funds that we've set up to support some of these priority areas. The comment I had to make on this one was, I know it says such as Puget Sound taxpayer accountability, et cetera. Could we add the Maureen Howard Affordable Housing Act? I didn't see that one in here as a significant local funding source that we have that could help support housing and homeless type activities that we may lose through the federal government. That's all I've got. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Krueger?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm thinking in this section that we specified not to add new programs that would take from the general fund. And I guess case in point, which I won't be popular with some people, is like the UBI. You know, we don't have dollars to put into a program of universal basic income at this time, and we shouldn't be looking at doing those things when we don't have the funding for it. It jeopardizes other things. And so this might be a spot where you could put, you know, no new additions of growing government until we got to be able to handle what we have already. So, thank you.
Clarifying question, is that its own thing though? I feel like that's kind of its own statement as opposed to getting it involved in.
It could be, but when I just look at the opening sentence, first clause, to protect the long-term health of the general fund, not adding growing government would help to achieve that. That's why I think for it to put it there, but it could go in its own number as well.
Okay. We'll ponder how that might work in there and see, unless others have to think about how to word that. Because there could be programs that we have to start to fill a gap that doesn't exist. So then I don't want to get sideways of us. But it is just a resolution, which is just intent, policy intent, the way I like to think about it. Okay.
Yeah, there's gaps everywhere. So we've only got so much.
Correct.
Maybe
I've
next year.
not found my money tree.
I planted one.
You planted one?
It's not growing any fruit. So,
Darn it. Okay, reduce. Okay. Thank you for flagging a concern. Okay, number 9, anything else on this one? So I heard Maureen Howard Act as a call out. Okay. The other one I think is the example at the bottom where other counties have been able to utilize funds like from the behavioral health tax to fund senior centers, things like that. Like that's an example. Many of us have expressed an interest in expanding or increasing funding to senior centers because there is such a high need. Seeing how other counties have been able to use a tax that we have available to do that, and then what does that look like? So that's, again, like not a new program, Councilmember Krueger. It's not growing. It's just improving those services. So I'm trying to figure out with what you said if that would get wrapped around the axle, or since it's an existing program, but it would be growing our investment.
This looks existing. So we just have to apply common sense, I guess.
Okay. Just making sure I'm understanding. Oh, Councilmember Ayala.
Thank you, Chair. Just had one curiosity around the phrasing such as, and whether or not that would be synonymous to including but not limited to. Yeah, okay. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Item number 9, if it is necessary to use fund balance in the general fund, those funds should only be used to support non-reoccurring expenses, which, to your point, Councilmember Krueger, that's an area that I think, like adding new FTEs, that's going to be a challenge this year. We've added some in the past. Sometimes we've, moved FTEs around, but it's going to be pretty difficult to add FTEs this year. Any issues with this being a priority? Okay. We're getting lots of thumbs up. Councilmember Morrell, any thoughts? You've done this more than any of us.
I think I'm good with that one.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Boki, anything else from, and so actually, is there anything that belongs on this priorities list that did not show up? And it may be things that you have flagged from, so like for instance, I think Mr. Boki started with public safety was a pretty high priority for many of us. We talk about it explicitly. Is it something we want to call out in this, I'm calling it the front page though. I'm seeing head nods. Okay. So then let's talk about public safety, which is investments, but then what in here really, there we go. How do we want it on the front page? Like what is the priority? Continue, so like for instance, fund additional positions. That would be an ongoing cost. So that is a question that I would have as one of the ones that I looked at that I wonder about, especially when we potentially don't have a new funding source to use. So, but public safety in general, what specific ideas do we have? We will go, oh, this got lots of lights. Good job, everybody. Councilmember Morrell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I remember right, didn't we cut 6 or 7 deputies the last budget cycle?
I think they were corrections positions that were open.
Okay, yeah, because they've never been hired or never been filled, so we just reduced them. And I think the department accepted that. Yeah, I mean, we're going to have a tough time trying to hire and support the current staffing numbers that we have. So I don't
Councilmember
think
Morrell, I do stand corrected. There were some deputy positions taken out.
Yeah, there were.
Some law enforcement positions taken out, yes.
The one that I'm more concerned about is the incentives than anything else, because we lose our incentives and everyone else is giving away, $25,000, $30,000. We're going to be challenged to fill the positions that we currently have open. So we definitely need to figure out some kind of incentive package.
Okay. Councilmember Herrera.
And I concur with what Councilmember Morrell was talking about. The incentives are really important. I also wanted to make sure that if there's any way we could backfill some of the losses from some of the grant funding from the Sheriff's Departments. Those are some of the funding that they're going to be losing are kind of important things, and just wanted to make sure that that we have a very good Sheriff's Department and stuff like that.
Okay. And that was one of my questions that I wrote down, is that I don't know I think that we've gotten that presentation. If I look back, I can figure out what the loss was for the sheriff's, prosecuting attorney, and Superior Court. That's in the presentation. So figuring out a way to backfill those. And then other than the general fund, possibly behavioral health, if it's the therapeutic courts. But other than the general fund, there isn't a fund source for the sheriff's department on top of that I'm aware of.
So, Chair, just for a little bit of background, if I may.
Yeah.
In ARPA, the council budgeted for incentives, hiring incentives for sheriff law enforcement of $1.5 million. There is, as of the end of May, a little less than $735,000 remaining. So you're over halfway on that. Whether it gets all spent this year, I don't know, but it'll probably take you into 26 for a little bit. On the sheriff correction side, you put aside $1,150,000, and as of the end of May, there was almost just a touch under 400,000 left available. And you also had some for the juvenile court hiring incentives out at Riemann Hall, 205,000, and you have 105,000 remaining on that. So just for background, that over the biennium, those three sources were nearly $2.9 million, $2,870,000 by my rough calculation here. So that gives you some idea, and those would all probably have to come out of the general fund.
Okay. Our hiring incentives, one of the things that's available through 2015, would we be able to use that sales tax if it was, or the grant funding for hiring incentives? I feel like it is, but.
We'd have to check that.
Okay.
Just so there's an answer on the record, you're referring to what engrossed Senate House Bill 2015 and the criminal justice sales tax. Staff will research the question you asked.
Okay. I feel like we asked the question earlier, and so. Councilmember Yambay, I'm going to go to Councilmember Krueger because her hand was up before.
No, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, reiterate the importance of public safety, because that's why we have government in the first place, was because they needed that protection. And when I look at point 3 with the goal of achieving Vision Zero, I get that speed enforcement is something that everyone is up in arms about, because we've got that 5% that want to drive 100 in a 35 zone. But I have to prioritize the domestic violence going on or the shooting going on as a priority for these guys and women, as opposed to doing a specific focus on traffic enforcement. I just don't know how they can, have the time to sit in an area. Because I think the focus when they did that sting in Frederickson that was very effective was, in the 35-40 zone, getting those cars that were going, 80, 90, 100, or whatever they can do. And having that, I think, is important, but focusing on the overall purpose of the public safety versus just that one area, I would stress more on the whole rather than that small part. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, so when we talk about, just to reiterate, right now the conversation is trying to figure out what would be a budget priority. Your idea is Vision Zero wouldn't basically make it to the front page, or traffic safety wouldn't make it to the front page, but the other two items that have come up, you're okay with, around grant funding and incentives to hire deputies? We
need more, especially like I've got a lot of territory in my district, and to get from South Hill to LB is a long shot. From the detachment, whenever that gets done, to be different. But there's just a lot of territory to cover. We need more bodies. And I believe we're last in the nation for some of these stats. I don't know them off the top of my head in particular. But yes, the incentives are good. The Vision Zero is just a title, that's been using that that program as a reason. We need law enforcement on the speeding, not just because of Vision Zero, because we need it. I don't want to make an excuse for it, but it's part of the whole in the mix. So yes, on your question on the other things, the filling of the grants, the need to incentivize, absolutely.
Okay.
So
That's helpful.
you.
Thank you. Councilmember Yambe.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I echo some of the sentiments that my colleagues have said. I don't think there's one member in either group up here that does not consider public safety extremely important and top of mind to our constituents. So I'm glad that we're all on the same page. I think I am, Councilmember Denson, myself, being in municipal government, we, knew how difficult it was for our cities to hire extremely, well qualified and, officers that can pass background checks, and with the incentives that our cities could offer, and our counties are very hard to compete with some of these larger jurisdictions who have larger resource pools, and for every 100 applicants you get one or two. I'm sure Councilmember Herrera could tell me the exact numbers, but you have to go through a lot of applicants to get one or two officers. So I think that's an ongoing frustration. And staff, could you remind me? So we just passed all this legislation at the state level about added incentives, 100 million or 100 billion for new police officers and law enforcement related services. Could you remind us why Pierce County is not qualifying for these things? It's slipping my mind.
Ms. Kelly, I see.
I believe Ms. Kelly is available to answer that question.
Okay.
We'll put a pin in it, though. She didn't raise her hand, so.
So I think, and Ms. Kelly can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that part of the underlying issue was that we need to be in compliance with the Keep Washington Working Act. And so, for me as a government elected official, I'm saying, hey, there's this money on the table, and my jurisdiction isn't able to qualify, and I feel a little sad about that. So
There are a set of criteria that need to be met in order for a jurisdiction to be eligible for the sales tax, and Ms. Kelly's researched that extensively. So do you want to speak to that?
Thank you. For the record, Andrea Kelly, council staff. In order to qualify to impose the public safety tax, Pierce County has to be eligible to receive a law enforcement grant from the Criminal Justice Training Commission. And the eligibility criteria for that largely rests with law enforcement. So there are a number of conditions that law enforcement has to meet to be able to be eligible to receive one of those grants. We don't have to be receiving one of those grants, but we do have to be eligible to receive one of those grants.
But there's, a large amount of money that is out there that, if we were consistent, that we could qualify for, correct?
Correct. It is $100 million that was allocated toward those law enforcement grants that CJTC is currently developing the process for the application process and those things.
So since we don't have those options, we have to get creative or on our own in regards to that. Okay, I appreciate it. Thanks for refreshing my memory.
Absolutely. Thanks for running down to Chambers. Appreciate it. Councilmember Krueger?
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Kelly, if you could maybe stick around. What were all of the uses of that dollars? Because it wasn't just about having deputies on the road, correct?
Correct. So to make sure I'm understanding your question correctly, are you inquiring about the law enforcement grant or the public safety tax?
$100 million, the grant.
$100 million. Sorry.
Who all could apply for that? What all organizations? Or types of?
Let me pull that up. Apologies. Any jurisdiction. There were 3 criteria with that. It's any jurisdiction who hasn't voted down a public safety sales tax in the past 2 years, I believe. Those agencies able to qualify was fairly broad. Pierce County does qualify in that regard as being able to apply. But the criteria, the eligibility criteria to be able to apply for the criminal justice law enforcement grant essentially has a number of restrictions or criteria, being compliance with Keep Washington Working Act, compliance with trauma de-escalation and use of force training,
If I might add a little bit, because I think there were a lot of things that were requiring additional training that is more of a burden on the police officer. But I'm thinking that, behavioral health can apply for this, just other, it would be maybe for Raymond Hall. There are all the other jurisdictions that would be eligible to apply for the dollar, so it wasn't necessarily going to keeping the sheriff's department whole with deputies, correct?
So no, clarification, the law enforcement grant, though that $100 million is very specific and goes to law enforcement. The public safety sales tax does open a wide range of co-responders, behavioral health treatment agencies, a number of other criminal justice activities. It's very broad. It has those applicants have to have a nexus to reducing involvement in the criminal legal system. The other piece that I wanted to highlight is that the application of the law enforcement grants can be used toward law enforcement maintaining compliance or getting their workforce up to speed with those training criteria in regard to the use of force and de-escalation. So if you're law enforcement, if the applying jurisdiction isn't compliant with those criteria, the monies received from the law enforcement grant could be used to get compliant with those conditions if there is a financial hardship for the jurisdiction.
Yeah, that's why I'm thinking it really complicated, made it more difficult to do their jobs than what it was worth. It's one of those sounds good, but when implemented, it's more costly and less effective. So that might be a topic for public safety sometime. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Kelly.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you for the comments. We'll go to Councilmember Ayala.
Thank you, Chair. Just one quick question, Ms. Kelly. You mentioned that, I think it was CJLE was creating a process for the application process. Would you happen to know when we were to maybe expect a final result of that?
The legislation didn't state a specific date, but it did speak of January of next year.
26.
26,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Ms. Kelly? Thanks for running down here. We're almost done with public safety, so maybe if you hang out just in case we shift to something else. I think my thoughts would be to kind of create a number, one of our numbers on the front, and it's public safety, really focusing on bullet 1 and bullet 4 as being items that I'm hearing consensus on with, and Councilmember Denson is number 2. Tell me more.
Thank you, Chair. I think similar to most of our other budget priorities, my goodness, we could take pretty much most of what we have in the bullet points under investments, or staff could, and generalize it a little bit more, talking about how council and the community, has made public safety a priority, and that includes, and correct me if you guys don't agree, but that includes retaining at a minimum current staffing levels through mechanisms like hiring incentives, improving the hiring process, which includes the background check stuff, which was so important. I mean, we know from the Sheriff Department that sometimes people want to join Pierce County, but it takes us so long to get through the process that they sign on with another agency because they have to take the deal that's presented to them. So I feel like staff can incorporate a lot of this because the sentiment really is that we value public safety. We want deputies on the streets protecting folks, and these and the bullet points are some of the key initiatives of getting there. Does that make sense? I just want to make sure the background check part is in there, because that was hugely important.
It does, but it talks about adding a position, which is why I was hesitant to
A position.
fund
Oh,
additional
positions.
positions for background checks. So that's,
Which is true. I mean, that in terms of something that I've desired, because we've talked to the sheriff department and the guild about possibly bringing back some retirees or offering that. But that, I know there's some legislation behind that, because we just need more folks doing those background checks to move these through the process. So maybe we can massage the language to kind of open that up a little bit more.
I mean, they could just
Agree with that.
use one of their vacant positions until they have no vacant positions left and they've done their job,
They could do
something
that,
like that.
Yeah.
They could always reclassify positions within the budget, which is allowed. And they could reclassify even other civilian positions that they have. Not an expert on the staffing model of the
Okay.
sheriff's department, but yeah, that's all possible.
Okay. So we'll kind of ponder what that looks
But like
like.
kind of the
but-
sentiment behind it, and make it broad enough to allow the executive to work with the sheriff's department to get to the objectives, which is adequate number of law enforcement officers to keep the public safe. I mean, that's the end goal.
Okay.
So, I think I've got it. Let me try to repeat back here. We have those 4 items under investments, beginning of the page, public safety, and it looks like you've coalesced around 1 and 4. You also want to have some language about the hiring process. So I think Councilmember Denson put it very well. I think we can get that in and over. The theme there is we want more sheriff's deputies. We want them as soon as possible, and we want to make that happen. And we'd like the budget to help make that happen.
Yes.
I'll work with it.
Let's try that. See what you come up with.
Councilmember Krueger?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I like Councilmember Denson's idea on the retirees coming. I can't help but believe that, they are altruistic in their service and what they've done, that they might be open to having a commission of experts there that can review some of the backgrounds and background checks and alleviate some of the need to hire, and they can kind of be a filter for the sheriff's department on the hiring. And maybe that's a crazy idea, but I think they have the best interests at heart for the county and for the other sheriffs.
I appreciate the creative thinking. We can pass along the question. I just want to do everything and anything to reduce liability. That's with the sheriff department at the end of the day. That's
And
my goal.
I would just like to clarify that it was not my idea. I think it was either the sheriff department or the sheriff department guild, but they had, and I thought it was very reasonable. If folks would like to come back part-time and help get through the background checks, then fantastic. But thank you, Councilmember Krueger.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Anything else on public safety becoming a priority? Okay. So the next investment section, is there anything in this, and we're going to have to any of these could be eliminated? Let's start there. Are there any that you feel like just, we really, this next biennium can't ask for this as an even we can't do it? And it was really hard when I was looking at this, by the way, because yes, we should do all these things. I think one of the, while people are reading, sorry, the second bullet that says fund sanctioning campaigns, I think that should be temporary housing communities, since that's what we actually generated. And sanctioned encampments have a different feel. And it is okay for us to say they're really, we really wish and hope we can find a way to do all of these.
I have something.
Vice Chair Herrera?
Just on the third one, I guess, where's this coming from? Including the backfilling of shelter beds in Tacoma. Do we fund some of those, or what is that?
So the city of Tacoma has funded shelter beds in the numbers of hundreds, and I don't know if either Ms. Connolly or someone's going to run down here or raise their hand, but they have been using their funding sources to pay for shelter beds. They've lost the ability to continue to do that, so they've closed or are potentially closing some other shelter beds. I filled enough time for Ms. Connolly to get down here. Do you need us to repeat the question?
Yes, could you repeat the question, because I missed the last 30 seconds of it.
Sure. My question was on here, on some of the housing and community services, the third bullet down says fund emergency shelters, including backfilling funding for shelter beds at risk of closure in the city of Tacoma. And we're kind of talking about prioritizing what? And my question was, why are we thinking about funding stuff in Tacoma? What's happening there?
Yes, so there are a series of emergency shelters, and I don't have the data on hand of exactly how many beds those are, but they had contracts with the city of Tacoma ending at the end of this month, so I believe today. And the city of Tacoma was able to work with some to ensure that those beds could stay open. There are others that are in the process of closing down because of lack of funds. I believe that Pierce County funds some of those shelters, but not all of them. And again, I can get that more information. But this priority was put together in collaboration with Councilmember Ayala, who just wants to ensure that we are keeping as many beds open as possible, I think, in the city of Tacoma. And I'll let Councilmember Ayala say anything else to that.
I'll just add one little detail around a lot of the shelter beds in Tacoma house non-Tacoma residents. So providers are not turning people away based on their residency. And so we do have some individuals from around Pierce County that are using some Tacoma shelters.
And I know there was an ask to the state to fill this gap. They did not get the full amount that they needed to keep them all going. So we'll go to Councilman Morrell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I appreciate the discussion on this subject matter. We're looking at expanding sanction encampments outside into the county, and then we're being requested to continually fund beds within the city of Tacoma. So I think at some point we've got to figure out, is our priority to expand out into the county, or is our priority to maintain what we have with beds in the city of Tacoma? I know their funding from the state, if I remember, I got cut by 50%. So they're obviously going to need help in some capacity, and I think there again, that's where we have got to figure out what we're going to do, because if we expand encampments, sanctioned encampments outside of the city of Tacoma in unincorporated areas, then we need to make sure we can support those long term and not just through a budget cycle and then end up like the city of Tacoma having to shut them down. So I think there again, we really need to be forward thinking in how we use those dollars. And though, I want to help Tacoma out because they've been a great partner, but we can't do both, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. Councilmember Krueger?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to agree with the sentiments of Councilmember Morrell. And I think my question is, if we're already funding, giving support to the city of Tacoma, wouldn't that be paying our fair share for those who are residing in the city that are from the unincorporated area? Looking into that. Plus, that is where services are, in the expense of bringing more services out to create another, to grow another need in an area. I don't know that that would be a wise decision. And so that's my thoughts on that point. But I wanted to look at the fund educational courses on rights and responsibilities. I don't think we need to do that. There are already organizations that do that. The state should be doing that. And so that doesn't, I think that can be eliminated. So that's what I have so far on this section.
Okay. Thank you. And I don't think this document is we have to choose, so it sounds like we have some conversation around some where we're investing, and the budget will allow us to amend that in, so whether it's Tacoma or temporary housing communities or both, like that's the conversation to have when we have the budget. I think both have a place and space to think about, but we are going to have some constraints when it comes to figuring out where those dollars go. It also could be something that goes out into the world for people to apply for, and the vetting of those applications could lend itself to spending funds in the city of Tacoma versus a temporary housing community if they score better, unless we say, hey, you can't spend this money in Tacoma. And we do have some language with, I think, Maureen Howard and some of our other other dollars that we specifically say this can only be spent outside the city limits of Tacoma. So there are some issues. The other part to think about with our unhoused population is that the impacts to public safety with our jail, our behavioral health, our social safety nets, our businesses, when those services go away and people are displaced, they end up moving further away from where services are. And for many of us, that will be the kind of urban parts of unincorporated Pierce County along bus lines where they can move around, and we will feel those impacts if they don't have shelter beds where we have them. So there is an analysis, kind of cost-benefit analysis along the impacts to these human beings as they are just trying to survive. So, Councilmember Krueger.
And thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a very difficult situation because it's such like a gerbil wheel that goes around and you don't know where it can stop. And I guess at what point do we set a limit? Because when do we price ourselves out of being able to do this housing and these services? I don't think it's shrinking, and I don't think we're getting fewer applicants to the many needs of all the programs and the housing and whatnot. And I don't have an answer. I wish I did, that magic wand. But, there is a point of where we just don't have the money. And where's the cutoff, and how do we address that, or how do we know when we're getting to the cutoff? How many, if all of our focus is projected towards this philanthropic work, what are we doing for the business community so that they can generate the revenue to pay the taxes for this? So, where's the balance? And so I guess those are things that we're wrestling with this, but I just wanted to point that out as consideration as we continue through this process.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know where the fund educational courses and rights, Councilmember Ayala, did that come from your county's program?
That was a different conversation. This was something that came out of reducing individuals entering homelessness. So it's an effort that has been shown in other counties. Not to duplicate what is out there, more to centralize and streamline, which is a big part of, I would say, our URA effort is a way in which we are centralizing and streamlining this work. Something like this would require a lot of coordination with our partners, along with our county establishing some shared agreements and whatnot. And so I can't imagine this to be lifted up in the next year or two, but the beginning conversations of this being a more, what's the word? An improved process to what we have right now to reduce individuals entering homelessness.
Okay. So my clock says we have 4 more minutes. We did not finish this whole list, everybody. And tomorrow we have 2 executive sessions back to back, so we don't have tons of time during study session. Feel like staff need a little bit more time to figure out that front page with the resolutions. So thoughts on tomorrow, or do we want to go a couple more minutes? I think we ended at 3 because of, I don't remember why. Someone's calendar. Does everybody have a few more minutes to try and plow through these last ones? I feel like some of these are less, I'm not going to say controversial, but maybe lower discussion. Okay. Staff, is anybody, are we okay for a few more minutes? Okay. So number 3, economic growth, workforce development. Councilmember Denson lit up right away. We'll just go right to you.
We're going to speed things along here. The second bullet point, I was thinking we could broaden this a bit and say strengthen support for youth employment opportunities, comma, including internship programs, comma, to enhance workforce development programs. Internships are awesome. Our internship programs are awesome, but they serve a limited number of young people and they cost us money, and we're trying to figure out ways to reduce that. So we have money for it, great. If not, encouraging opportunities for youth employment also fulfills some of those same objectives. It's good for youth, it's good for workforce development, and it doesn't cost us money. So just broaden it a bit. Thank
Okay.
you. That's all I've got.
Thank you. Other comments? Councilmember Morale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just kind of curious, we're on economic growth, right?
Yep.
Okay. The first bullet, establish a child care ombudsman to assist providers. What is that? I obviously missed that one.
Councilmember Denson, I'm going to go to you because I feel like this is from you or something like it's from you.
Yes, and now that you read it, again, Councilmember Morale, we probably need to say providers or potential providers, something like that, maybe potential providers. This is in response to the discussions we have had about how difficult it is to open childcare facilities and how great it would be if we had some sort of a person who is an expert in this that could help guide people through this process. I don't know what that noise is. Make sure that they can work through all of the different regulatory agencies. In a rural area, they just hit one wall after another in regards to water capacity, sprinkler systems, the zoning, obviously, what's allowed, not allowed in different community plan areas. So this was somebody that could kind of hold folks' hands to get through the process, open childcare facilities, which has an impact on people's ability to work or go to school or do anything else.
I think there again, I appreciate everything, the complexities. It's probably no different than any other business that wants to open up in a rural area. I just don't know, there again, are we adding FTEs to the budget? And I just don't think that's going to fly. So I understand it. I wish the state would take it upon themselves to provide this type of service, but I just don't think we can do it at this time. So anyway, that's my 2.5 cents.
I do get that. And regardless of whether this stays in here or not, maybe that's something we add to our potential legislative agenda. That could even be an operating budget request, a pilot program. The state could fund us to be able to do this for a year or two and see if it does help increase capacity. I'll put that on my list.
Yeah, and there again, we would have to find a way to continually fund it, even if it was a pilot. So once they're on, it's tough to get them off.
That's true.
So anyway, I appreciate the explanation.
Thank you for the comments, and we can kind of think about how to manage that. And we do have a new director of planning and public works that'll be interviewed tomorrow, so maybe somebody asks him about how we would make it easier for childcare to be developed. That'd be a super easy, off-the-cuff question for him to figure out. Any other items in economic development? Councilmember Krueger?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have to agree on the child care. That's a state thing. We are not the obstacle. And so maybe lobbying the state. The internship programs, I think what we have is fine. I wouldn't increase them just because of all of the pieces that are moving right now. And the green industry resources, I think we already allocate plenty, and we don't need to add to that, plus of all the resources that are available at the state level. And I want to emphasize the last one on, the ag tourism and the sports in the LTAC. They do a great return on investment and bringing, people in to spend their dollars, but not necessarily looking for houses to live in. So that I think is a great priority. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I hear you. I appreciate the thought. I really like the idea of expanding. We're trying to do some investments in younger and young adults in employment, and we have a lot of really amazing colleges, and so I think it's strengthening support could mean a lot of different things. It's not saying we're going to invest dollars or invest funding, but maybe there's some ways to partner with some of our technical colleges and things around work at the county or being creative. So we want people to stay here and find jobs here and pay taxes here.
If I might add, if we are kind of a roundtable thing, is making it easier for employers to employ the youth. I know that could be really a state thing as well, but that's a lot of liability to hire somebody younger. And I think we're missing out on a lot of transfer of knowledge when someone who's been in the business can't hire somebody young because of liability and where they could learn something of value. So thank you.
Thank you. Planning and infrastructure development. This is where I would see the Vision Zero portion showing up, just to signal like this is where, like when we're planning road projects, prioritizing and things like that. We'll go to Councilmember Denson.
Thank you. I have two things. Mr. Taylor and I discussed the first one, maintain or expand code enforcement services. Mr. Taylor, did we come up with a good goal? I felt like we needed to expound on that, like with a goal of improving and, more enforcement.
So we don't have language yet, but the sentiment was to specify or include within this bullet the outcomes that are sought. It's not simply just maintaining or expanding code enforcement services, but the outcome that's being sought from that expansion. So we'll
Thank you.
Work on some language to that effect.
Could it relate to response time for projects, like response times to?
It could be improved environmental health, for instance, if it was environmental related code
Just
enforcement.
more satisfactory resolution
Yes.
of code enforcement cases and PPW is working on this too. So this is a goal that they are working on. We talk about this a lot.
Okay.
So I think they know what we're talking about and we share similar goals.
Okay.
And then the second thing I wanted to propose was a new bullet point that says incorporate 6 PPDQ removal infrastructure on priority roads for our efforts to continue improving the health of our waterways. I know we can't do them all, but we heard from, I think PPW or SWIM, that they were prioritizing roads. So could we start chipping away at the highest priority roads, the highest priority salmon-bearing creeks, for example, if that's what they decide the priorities are.
Okay. Anything else on planning and infrastructure development? Councilmember Krueger, I saw you come off mute. Did you have something?
Well, I'm thinking, I reduce regulatory when possible. or regulations. Because that helps save money and less people to have to follow up.
Would it be reduce or streamline regulatory processes to?
Yes, both.
Okay.
To save time. I don't know. It's just, I think we've been dealing with this since the beginning of
Forever.
the county. Just how to make it better and
Okay.
affordable.
Number 5, environmental and land stewardship. Every time I see ORCA, I have to process and remember what that stands for, so.
Yeah. I put on using up-to-date science. I know that's important to you guys.
Where would you want use best available science in this?
Not best available necessarily, because that can mean what's in my office. Variety of resources with current science.
Okay. Is that in response to the first item or just in general?
Well, it could be for all of them. I don't, what does it mean conservation easements for parks? Because I've been thinking parks just buy the land. Why
Councilmember
would there
Denson,
be
do you want to fill in on that one? Because I think this is one of your CDEC projects.
Yes, because currently, not all of our Pierce County parks are protected with conservation easements, which mean that, in the future, a different council could decide to take one of our public lands, our county public lands, and, sell it off, put a parking lot on it, any number of things. So there is a list of parks that are not protected by conservation easements, and I think we should start chipping away at that list by protecting some of the ones that are most perhaps at risk, the most vulnerable.
I think I would call that a waste of time. Too many people love their parks and people would go ballistic. And well, it's not a secret that I'm vehemently against easements, conservation easements and that, so that can be another discussion. What does that mean, shoreline assessments? Fund shoreline assessments.
That's actually something that was in the last biennial budget that did not get completed. There has been some work done by Planning and Public Works on that, but it hasn't
like the
been.
docks?
I think it's an inventory of the shorelines. Mr. Kruger could explain it better than me, but it's something that I believe we need to do as we work towards our shoreline master plan update in 2029. There's a lot of work that has to be done to get to that, and this is one of the items that needs to be done. And so in the budget, I propose that we finished funding this project that's very important for shoreline management program.
I guess I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, if it's not until 2029, based on the circumstances we are in, that would not rate a 10, at least in my book, so.
Yeah, these things
Okay.
take a long time, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
other things that we have to do. So I think they're kind of chipping away at it so that we get to where we need to get in 2029. Mr. Taylor might have more information, but is that pretty accurate?
Councilmember, yes, it's accurate. The shoreline update has to be adopted by the end of 2029. There's obviously a work in advance of that has to be completed, just like any planning process. And so the shoreline inventory and characterization likely needs to be completed or at least initiated a couple of years in advance of that 2029 date. So think about the comprehensive plan update that the council just went through. That process actually took 2.5 years before you got to that product and that statutory deadline. So,
That allows for the public input, all of that.
correct.
But there was already some sort of a shoreline update, so it can't be that much more, can it?
So the county has not completed the shoreline master program update to the extent required by state law. So substantial
Right, but
work
some
is
of-
still needed.
Well, just Thank you.
There was small, what are they called, incremental, there's been a couple targeted shoreline master program, I forget the term.
Limited amendments.
Sorry, what was that?
Limited
Amendments, yes, done over the years. But this is, the comprehensive plan analogy is perfect. This is a huge one. And we have to have a lot of data and a lot of science so that we're making, we're getting a firm plan moving forward into the future. So this is an important piece of it.
Okay. Public amenities and beautification.
I thought this was all great.
Okay. Technology. I know this is something that we've talked about. Councilmember Krueger.
Thank you. For the prevention efforts and signage and marketing campaign, I get cleanup programs, but a marketing campaign, I wouldn't spend $1 for that. I think that it's out there already. People know not to do that. Cleaning, I don't know where that's worked. Maybe it has, and I'm just not aware. But I'm not seeing proof in spending money on a marketing campaign to prevent litter, because those who litter can't read. So that's my opinion. They don't read the signs.
Okay. I was like,
That makes more sense.
I got it.
So, anyway, I just, it's just years of drilling that, and we still have the graffiti. There still is the garbage. I don't know what to tell you. I wouldn't spend money on it. That's just me.
okay. We'll take a look. I think one of the reasons I saw this is not so much teaching people not to litter, but engaging people to do more community cleanups, doing more adopt a streets, doing more around how they can, I don't know, recycle appropriately. But we can fine tune or think about that one and see what it looks
I
like.
think it's both, actually. I hear from, and Councilmember Krueger, I 100% hear you, and I get the frustration, and it's so frustrating that people continue to litter, because I do think people know that it's wrong. But I hear from constituents all the time, like referring to the decades past when there were marketing campaigns, educational campaigns in the schools, more signage, billboards, like real efforts to drive, I guess, a shift in social consciousness, or to guilt people into it, or make the right connections between, throwing out, what it is, like the rings that the soda pop used to come in, and killing turtles in the sea, like efforts like that really stuck in people's minds. And I have constituents all the time saying, why isn't there more effort to really elevate how horrible litter is, not only for the beauty of our county, but for its impacts to wildlife and the environment. So this may not be something that we can afford, but I think it's good to put in here as a what are we calling these, investments, because it's something the constituents talk to me a lot about. They want to see us trying to do more.
Well, there's that, but I don't have anyone telling me to do a marketing campaign. If we're going to, I think I want to open a business, because that's where the money goes. We've done all that, and that when you try to do a cleanup of an area, I've looked into that, and like the easy spots or the good spots, safe spots are already taken, and on the highway, it's a whole another story dealing with the state. Not to mention, there was a group that wanted to go clean up the area behind the Safeway, and they couldn't. It wasn't safe because of the drugs and whatnot. You don't know what you're picking up, and that's part of the problem that it's getting to in neighborhoods. It can be anywhere. You don't know if you're picking up something that has powder on it that you shouldn't touch. And so, there's the parameters of where this is headed makes it difficult. And, that's the point of all the campaigns we've already done, and here we are. And it sounds good. A lot of things sound good. But do we feed somebody who is starving, or do we, put a sign up that says don't litter? That's how I look at it. So anyway, my soapbox. Thank you.
I know where I would land with that one as well, Councilmember Krueger. Okay, so 7, 8, and 9, they're just like one item each. So thoughts, feedback, concerns, The annexation incorporation one is interesting. I don't know that we have any jurisdictions that are asking. I have some students that want us to investigate and have formally asked me to investigate incorporating Parkland. They were supposed to present at tonight's meeting and they will not be. So,
interesting.
but I did not put this one on here, so. Okay. Councilmember Morrell.
I'll speak to this one. One of the challenges that we have at this county is because we have so much unincorporated areas. We need to encourage incorporations, annexations. It gets more and more challenging because of the state laws that get put on to mainly cities. They can't even keep up with their own growth within their boundaries, much less look to expand, and then what the state would mandate on them. So we need to encourage more incorporations in an incorporated area, and maybe that's just to be a point of contact, to have someone knowledgeable enough that, you know, we can make these advancements. We've invested in the past in these studies, and mainly in the Parkland Spanaway area, but there again, I think, you know, we've got to do something to encourage more incorporation in our unincorporated areas. So whatever that is.
So one of the asks that I've put forward to some of our colleagues at the state level is the potential of doing utility taxes inside our UGA, but the county would collect it to do investments in infrastructure specifically to get an area ready to. So I've asked legally if you can do that, because technically unincorporated Pierce County cannot do utility taxes. It is how we invest at a city level. It's one of their main sources of revenue, but we have city-like density and no funding for it. And it's really hard to say you're going to become a city when you'd have to just, bam, turn on all these services and fix all your roads and do all these things. And we can't keep trying in these urban areas. We are hitting a threshold that we cannot do it. Councilmember Krueger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I've kind of had obstacles with this one because we have funded studies, and the one I recall from the Spanaway that, you know, if they could get Frederickson in, it would pencil out, but otherwise it does not. And then we also had, you know, when Councilmember Zeiger was here, the beginnings of a study there on South Hill, and I don't think that was penciling out either. And while I understand the need for it, I just can't validate spending money when there could be just outreach of volunteers. Hey, do you want, you know, whatever you have to do to incorporate like that. And I just don't think we're at a time and place in dollar-wise to fund that, but maybe encourage it through other ways. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We could say provide resources, and then it's maybe it's people power or something. That way it's still in there and it's a priority, because it is something I've heard from Councilmember Denson wanting areas to be next to Gig Harbor, and then South Hill area still, I think, is interested in moving that way. Councilmember Morrell.
Yeah, also to follow up on your comment pertaining to the state, I remember, Lord, 30 years ago, that King County got a piece of legislation passed that the state would credit back incorporated areas a portion of the sales tax. So it gave them an incentive and an immediate bucket of cash to do that. Now, it was only for King County, but that's how Snohomish, Covington, and some of those cities got started. I'd like to have that opportunity for Pierce County.
Sounds like we're developing our legislative agenda for next year. Councilmember Yombe.
So I'll echo those sentiments, and I appreciate whichever member brought this item up. I think that, you know, in my district, for example, we just had our legislators from the 27th push legislation to fund a Department of Commerce study for the Browns Point and Dash Point areas, and I think that they've finished their results, and I think that it's similar to the other studies that have been talked about and referred, is that, you know, they don't exactly pencil out. But I will say, I think that it is helpful if we started at this level, hey, you know, people power or whatever, to, you know, do this, and then when we go to our next legislative session, we say, hey, we don't have the resources and the tools that we need, and we've had to stand up, you know, this position or whatever it is, our efforts to try to, you know, do this at our level, but we need more tools from the state. And so I think that's more compelling than just saying, hey, the state, you should do this, but here, you know, we put something in, you know, whatever it is, whatever it looks like. It may not, you know, be fully funded, but it says that, hey, we tried to figure this out on our own and we need more tools. And I think that's a compelling argument for the state, because I think that, you know, as Councilmember Herrera and Councilmember Morel, we, you know, talked about it, you know, briefly, and saying, hey, we don't have some of these tools to use, and that, you know, it would be really helpful for everyone, including these jurisdictions, to have some further incentives to make incorporation or annexation make more sense. So I think this brings it to the forefront. It keeps saying that this is an important issue, and so I appreciate it being brought up.
Thank you. Okay, so next steps with this, Mr. Boki? We didn't do a very good job of eliminating anything. I'm just going to say what
Yeah,
did
we
not
actually
happen.
have a few additional items.
But we moved some things around, so maybe that helps.
Here's what I'm proposing, that we have the council priorities that you passed earlier in the year. So what I would like to do is use those 7 categories that you have and try to place each of these items, especially on the investment side. They were just put together, right? It's just a list that was put together based on council member comments and input. So we'll move some of the public safety stuff up into the priorities. I'll form the priorities the same way we're talking, based on your priorities that you've put together and passed earlier this year, and I'll do that on the investment side. And so hopefully that'll become more coherent to not just the council, but to the public. It'll fit, and you'll see how it fits into your priorities, and then we'll go from there. The document itself, the resolution itself, is going to have to look a little bit different. Last time, we'll have the whereases. Last time we actually did an exhibit. We could do that again. We'll have to work, and I'll work with Mr. Taylor and the rest of the staff to try to figure out, and the chair, to try to figure out a good way to present it and how you would like to see, because then it's not, the audience definitely is the executive, correct? That's the primary audience, the executive and his team, but it's also the general public. So how do you want that to look going forward? But if you give me that leeway, I'll structure the priorities and the investments into your priorities, those titles, those 7 titles, and we'll go from there. Does that sound good?
I think that makes a lot of sense, because I think it kind of keeps our language the same, and we've articulated kind of those areas, and then these are our funding priorities. We'll take a look at how to do the investments and priorities and what that looks like. Are we actually adopting the priorities and the investments, or is the investments just an internal document for us? But I know that we need to send something to the executive. So we just kind of need to think about that. So is there anything else before us in committee of the whole? Do we have a deadline or something that we're aiming for the executive?
It's up to you.
When's he delivers September something? 23rd. He definitely needs it prior to that.
So in the past, when the council's done the resolutions, they've been typically adopted late in July. So by the end of July would be my recommendation.
Okay. Sounds good. Then we'll start figuring out where that'll get scheduled and how that'll work. Any other comments or questions from my colleagues? Staff, thank you for staying for an extra half hour, and to my colleagues, thank you for staying for an extra half hour so we could get this done. Seeing no other business, we are adjourned.